Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Last American Hero, The Remarkable Life of John Glenn, by Alice L. George, narrated by John Pruden. Prologue. Without heroes, we are all plain people and don't know how far we can go. Bernard Malamud. Hero. John Glenn absorbed the title like a plant consuming a drop of water. It became a part of him. It nourished him, stimulated him, invigorated him. It changed his life without displacing his essence. John Glenn, the hero, would thrive, but John Glenn, the small-town boy, would always rule his heart. In an age almost devoid of heroes, he became an anomaly, the last of his kind in an anti-heroic age, a man with both physical courage and moral conviction. In old age, he witnessed the decline of honesty, courage, and empathy in American discourse. He saw the abandonment of heroes, who were replaced by visions of villains on all sides in a polarized America. However, he never relinquished the exalted status bestowed upon him by the American people, who had followed his life and found something great within it. His heroic stature was rare at the start of the 21st century, but others of his breed hold places in the nation's history. This biography does not strive to place Glenn on a pedestal. Instead, it sets out to show how a human being, flawed like all of us, was able to navigate a remarkable life. Fueled by hard work, bravery, love, and devotion, he assembled a long list of accomplishments. He had no superpowers and wore no halo, and still, his lifetime of achievements turned him into a venerated figure, a role he never sought. Throughout his life, he repeatedly greeted challenges by stepping forward and willingly offering his life in service to his country. Embracing his humanity, he aimed to lead a good life. At that, he succeeded, providing an inspirational model for other Americans to follow in trying times. His life was not only exemplary, but also truly phenomenal. He married the only girl he had ever dated, and his love never wavered during more than 70 years together. He fought in 2 wars. During the first, he met his childhood hero, Charles Lindbergh. During the second, he flew alongside one of the nation's greatest sports stars, Ted Williams, and downed 3 Soviet MiGs in the war's final 9 days. In the late 1950s, he set an aviation speed record and won the top prize on a TV game show. Then he soared into space as the first American to orbit Earth. He became a close friend to presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy and played a key role in the aftermath of his assassination. Always pursuing new challenges, Glenn served as a U.S. Senator for more than 2 decades before becoming the oldest person to travel in space. In a life full of big days, February 20th, 1962, the day of Glenn's first orbital flight during Project Mercury, affected his public life most profoundly. Without surrendering to fear, he flew into a maelstrom of unknowns. Afterward, all 50 states from Maine to Hawaii celebrated, with ticker tape raining in New York City and teary-eyed lawmakers saluting him on Capitol Hill. The Soviet Union had beaten the United States to every major space spectacular: first satellite, Sputnik in 1957, first manned flight, Yuri Gagarin in April 1961, first manned orbit, also Gagarin. But Glenn's flight, which unlike secret Soviet flights had garnered a full day of television coverage, had elevated American spirits while making each citizen part of a heart-pounding space opera. He became the American space hero. He was the guy who came to define that image of the astronaut, said Michael Neufeld, a curator at the National Air and Space Museum. From the first days after his flight, Glenn relaxed in the warmth of the spotlight. Confident without being cocky, he seemed comfortable with fame, and at the same time both humble and generous. His short addresses as a hero were far more powerful than the often wooden, overly detailed speeches he delivered later in life as a senator and a presidential candidate. Glenn never showed any sense of being oppressed by crowds of fans, and for more than half of his life, he unfailingly showed great willingness to stop and sign autographs. His apparently easy transition into life as a celebrity surprised many observers, but its naturalness added to America's respect for him. In The Right Stuff, Tom Wolfe wrote that President John F. Kennedy's fans screamed and grasped souvenirs, while the masses anointed Glenn and the Mercury astronauts with their tears. Demonstrating both his valor and his virtue, Glenn made no secret of his desire to embody what was best about America. The New York Times called him fabulously courageous, and Time reported Glenn's modesty, his cool performances, his dignity, his witticisms, his simplicity, all caught the national imagination. Over the course of a long life, Glenn gave to his country again and again. Throughout 23 years in the military and 24 years in the U.S. Senate, he literally devoted most of his adult life to his country and was still on the job at age 77. More than a daredevil pilot, this man was brave enough to ride a rocket twice and self-assured enough to listen to and truly hear Americans who were not white men like himself. He shunned pretense. He was comfortable in his own skin, and he had a special grace that enabled him to treat everyone, no matter what their status, as an equal. He was an adventurer, a father, a Christian true believer, and a cold warrior who pursued a breathtaking quest of exploration. And even years later, when his Marine buzz cut had been replaced by a bald head with gray fringe, Americans still looked at him and saw a hero. When President Kennedy decided to make his second and consummate argument for sending astronauts to the moon within the decade, he delivered an eloquent 1962 address at Rice University. In it, he admitted that the challenge would demand much from Americans. Echoing his inaugural address's call to duty, he predicted that sacrifice would be required from the nation's people. "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard," he declared. Kennedy placed space exploration in a historic continuum with the push to settle the American West. Voyaging to the moon became an extension of pioneering life, and John Glenn became a pathfinder on the way to the lunar surface. American exploration, from Lewis and Clark to the Apollo program, was acting both on a generic human impulse to seek knowledge and a deep-rooted American urge for inquiring, exploration, and the freedom of wide-open spaces, wrote space historian Asif A. Siddiqui. The symbolism defining the space program was not limited to frontier comparisons. "They were our gladiators in the contest with the Soviets," said Neufeld. Observers compared Mercury astronauts to single combat fighters, a centuries-old concept used in some cultures as a substitute for massive and bloody destruction. Each side of a conflict chose a champion, or hero, to fight in place of an army. During the Cold War period, small-scale competitions once again took on the magical aura of a testing of fate, of a fateful prediction of what would inevitably happen if total nuclear war did take place, wrote Wolfe. This symbolism gained power from the steeds on which the astronauts and cosmonauts rode, rockets designed as intercontinental ballistic missiles, weapons of nuclear war repurposed to serve as vehicles of exploration. Rather than being destructive, the rockets now became productive, opening the road to discovery. From the start, the poised and emotionally open Glenn received more attention than his terse teammates. After he became the first American to orbit Earth,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?